Germany and the EU, next on International Focus.
The Institute of World Affairs at UWM and Milwaukee Public Television present International Focus, a global magazine linking Wisconsin and the world.
Welcome to International Focus. I'm Doug Savage from the Institute of World Affairs at UWM. In the aftermath of the 2010 Greek bailout, Jean-Claude Juncker, chair of the Eurogroup finance minister, said, quote, "I'm worried that Germany's authorities are slowly losing sight of the European common good." Within Germany, there's an increasing reluctance to serve as the underwriter of EU rescue plans. In the foreign policy arena, Berlin's pursuit of a strategic partnership with Russia has prompted concern, particularly among newer EU members who were once part of the Soviet bloc. In a 2009 speech before the Bundestag, Chancellor Angela Merkel reiterated that, quote, "decisions about existential questions relating to the German nation are made in Berlin." Yet situated at the heart of the continent, bordering 9 other European states, the fates of Germany and the rest of the EU are inextricably bound. To help us explore this critical and evolving relationship, we're joined by William Drozdiak, President of the American Council on Germany, an independent, nonpartisan organization promoting dialogue among leaders in the United States and Europe. He previously served as Executive Director of the Transatlantic Center of the German Marshall Fund and had a 20-year career as a journalist working for Time and the Washington Post. His resume also includes a stint as a professional basketball player in the NBA and Europe. Bill Drozdiak, welcome to International Focus.
Pleasure to be with you.
Well, I wonder if we could start with just a little background on Germany's political system, how the parties relate, the federal government versus the state government, and just as sort of a primer on our discussion.
Well, Germany is a very decentralized country. The 16 states have a lot of power that they can exercise on their own. The federal government, led by the chancellor and her cabinet, decides on matters of state. But Germany has a decentralized form of government that enables cities like Dusseldorf, Munich, Frankfurt to have just as much authority in some areas as Berlin, the capital.
And what's the makeup of the national government now?
Well, the current government is led by Chancellor Merkel's Christian Democrat, a center-right party, and their junior coalition partner, the Free Democrats, what is known as sort of a free market German yuppie type of party. And so I guess you would characterize it as center-right overall. The opposition being Social Democrats, center-left, and the Greens, who focus mainly on environmental issues.
And how does this differ from what we've seen in recent years? I mean, this is a departure or largely consistent with the last few decades of federal government? Well,
previously we had a grand coalition of Merkel's party, the Christian Democrats, with the Social Democrats, the leading opposition, which together they accounted for about 80% of the seats in Parliament. The idea was to push through some hard reforms, but in the end it was pretty much paralyzed because neither of the major parties could agree on what should be the legislative agenda. So they more or less were treading water for a few years until Chancellor Merkel got the a partner that she was hoping to have in the Free Democrats.
And we have elections coming up?
Well, coming up this year are some very important state elections, which will be a test of Chancellor Merkel's authority. That's why she's been very cautious and deliberative in the way in which she makes decisions about bailing out some of the European partners, because these are sensitive issues for a number of German taxpayers who think that Germany should take account more of its national interests rather than being a sugar daddy for their partners.
And let's talk a little bit about the German economy. What are the big drivers of German prosperity these days?
Well, Germany is really the leading exporting nation in the world. By some accounts, even greater on a per capita basis than China. About 47% of the German economy is geared toward exports, and in terms of luxury automobiles and machine tools, exporting to China as well as to their European partners. Really is what drives the high living standards and prosperity that we see in Germany today.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Germany's role within the EU and in the early days as one of the early champions of integration. How much do you think the recent history of the country plays into that?
Well, it's interesting. At the outset of the European Union in the early 50s, the European Coal and Steel Authority was set up to basically try to make war impossible between the traditional antagonists, France and Germany. So the idea of Jean Monnet, the father of Europe, was to, and Robert Schuman and some of their colleagues, was to combine the coal and steel making industries of Europe together so that no one country could use the instruments of war against another. And this was remarkably successful, and that led to the creation of the common market, a single market uniting all of the European citizens, and which expanded when after the fall of communism. Now the European Union is consisting of 27 countries. So as it has grown, and particularly in the post-Cold War era, with no threat of an invasion to the German homeland, and with the unification since the fall of communism, Germany has become much more conscious of its national interests. That, combined with a new generation born after the war that doesn't feel the direct sense of guilt or responsibility for the crimes of the Holocaust and the Nazi regime. This has led to Germans yearning to be treated as a normal country, just like their partners, and I think that is why we see the rise of an attitude among younger Germans in particular, saying that we need to be aware of our own national interests and our own well-being, and we can't be the caretaker for all of our neighbors.
Well, and that certainly is a product of their prosperity, I would think, where there is an expectation, at least by many in the EU, that Germany does serve as sort of the ultimate guarantor of the EU. So, what are those tensions? I mean, what does the German populace expect from that equation versus what sort of more pan-Europeanists might?
Well, Germans are saying that, look, we Europeans are an aging population. We've had fewer babies than other societies over the last few years. So as a result, we need to save more and work longer. So therefore, we need to institute some tough reforms. That is, extend the working age, which Germany has done till the age of 67. Other countries have been reluctant to, for political reasons, to make these steps, which are very unpopular. Greece, for example, you can retire at the age of 55. So Germans have this view: look, why? And when I have to work longer, till the age of 67, why do I then have to see my tax money go to enable Greeks to retire at 55 and sail around the Aegean Sea on their yachts? So there's a feeling of resentment there, and they feel they want to make sure that their European partners are bearing their fair share of austerity measures.
Well, and I think in recent negotiations, the Merkel government certainly would characterize itself as having acquitted itself well and gotten the concessions it needed as a condition for those bailouts. But I'd like to read you a quote from Thomas Silberhorn, who was the head of the Christian Social Union in Bavaria, sort of the local affiliate of Chancellor Merkel's party, who said, quote, "The government has stepped over a red line that parliamentary groups had clearly defined." So he seems to think, maybe they gave away the farm.
Well, this is an attitude that one finds in the public mind, and so the CSU, this fellow's party, is very nervous about losing votes in the next state election in Bavaria. But when you consider all the ramifications, if the euro should implode and and countries go back to national currencies, Germany would suffer greatly, because the restoration of the German mark would cause it to soar in value relative to the other currencies, and this would undermine Germany's ability to sell its goods abroad. So this is something that Merkel is now acutely aware of, and not every other local politician in her party may feel that way. So there's that tension between those at the highest level of the federal government who want to use their authority and exercise responsibility on a European level in a fair and just way. And there are those local politicians who are primarily concerned with the next election and fearful that they will have to explain to the voter, look, we've got to bail out our friends the Greeks or the Irish one more time in order to keep the euro alive. And many Germans will say, well, forget about it, let's go back to the Deutschmark. So it's a difficult explanation to sell to the voters, but Chancellor Merkel is determined to push it through.
Well, on the other side of the coin, there's a certain amount of pushback among some of the other EU members who feel like maybe Germany is asking too much. There's a recent quote in the Telegraph in the UK said, "What is clear is that sovereign states are being forced to cut wages, dismantle parts of their welfare state under foreign diktat with a gun to their heads. This will not be forgotten lightly." So to what extent do you think the recipients of this German aid are feeling like they're being forced to pay too much?
Well, that's the attitude is certainly correct in terms of the perception from the European partners, and on top of that, you have still some lingering resentments from the war area. You've heard politicians saying that Germany is trying to accomplish now by dictating the terms of economic policy what it could not accomplish in the Nazi days, and of course that stirs up a lot of antagonistic passions on both sides. So it's a difficult thing to work through, but what we see is the natural push and pull of a negotiation that's being carried out, because I don't think Germany's European partners would be better off in seeing the euro collapse, and which would then call into question the entire project of the European Union.
Well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about some of the other foreign policy issues. We'll be right back with more International Focus.
The Institute of World Affairs presents our community with a range of public programs relating to global issues, U.S. foreign policy, and the world economy. For more information about the Institute of World Affairs, call 414-229-3220 or visit our website at www.iwa.uwm.edu.
Welcome back. We're talking about Germany and the EU with William Drozdiak. Well, one of the sort of pillars of American foreign policy in Europe was having Germany anchor an alliance, initially sort of protecting the Fulda Gap against the Soviet invasion. So for decades, I think the U.S. perception of foreign policy in Germany was they were the buttress against the Soviet Union. And now recently, Germany has sort of altered its strategic thinking, and particularly in the area of energy, is pursuing a much warmer relationship with Russia. First of all, what's the sort of context in which that warming has taken place?
Well, Germany is very reliant on its foreign energy suppliers. Russia alone provides about 40% of Germany's gas needs. So for the time being, Germany will continue to depend on supplies from Russia. And in turn, Germany has been helping Russia develop, particularly through the sale of its machine tools and other instruments of industry. So that relationship is important in a political sense as well, because Germany wants to maintain a good and friendly relationship with Russia. But I think the recent new concerns about the future of nuclear energy, for which Germany continues to rely on about 15 to 20% of its energy supplies, will make Germany look for other suppliers as well, because they've been very worried about being too dependent on Russia for its supplies of gas. So they're looking into the idea of having another pipeline come from Central Asia. That would enable them to diversify their sources of energy.
And how does that relationship between Germany and Russia play among some of the other EU partners?
Well, some of the others, particularly in the East, in the former communist countries, Poland, the Baltic states, that felt for many years under the thumb of Russia's leadership of the Soviet Empire, are worried that in the future Russia will exercise its energy clout in an aggressive manner. There's been a new development with the discovery of shale gas deposits in Poland, which are seen as a very hopeful prospect that Poland can become a new source of energy on its own, and that would alleviate any dependency on Russia. But it's created some tensions with Germany's political relationships with its eastern neighbors. And I think that this is something that's going to be difficult for them to resolve in the near future.
Well, and among the concerns some of those partners have raised is essentially, Germany has been less strident in pushing some human rights issues and other kinds of things that some of the other partners might voice towards Russia. And how would they respond to that?
Well, I think the Chancellor Merkel has, in private, spoken quite bluntly with Prime Minister Putin and President Medvedev about human rights issues. But more than that, I think that there's a suspicion and a fear in Poland, some of these other eastern states, that in an economic crisis, Germany would be tempted to sell out their partners for their own, to protect their own national economic interests. And it just shows you that even with the unification of Europe through the European Union project, there are still lingering tensions and suspicions that persist today.
Well, and it's a bit of a balancing act, I think, given Germany's historical relationship with the West writ large and sort of the Cold War era, and now trying to be a partner and good neighbor with the Soviet Union, with Russia these days. Do you think that is a real tension for policymakers, or are they managing it quite well?
Well, it's interesting when you look at the map of now a unified post-communist Europe. Germany is right in the middle. So you've had a shifting of the center of gravity in Europe to the center rather than from the West. And so therefore, Germany has to be just as solicitous of its eastern neighbors as it has been of its western neighbors. And increasingly today, anyway, I would say, rather than an east-west split, there's a north-south split. The north, Scandinavian countries, even the Baltic states, are doing quite well, along with Germany. So Germany has been enhancing its trade ties with the northern wealthy tier of Europe. The southern states, the Club Med, so to speak, of the periphery in the south, from Greece all the way through Italy and even France and Spain, Portugal, and up to Ireland, are seen as the weak sisters of the European Union, and thus much more dependent on bailouts from Germany and the wealthier northern states. So, yeah, I think in the future it's going to be this north-south split that some say could even lead to a division within the European Union, making it a two-speed kind of Europe.
And, we tend in this country, I think, to think of sort of the transatlantic relationship and Germany relative to U.S. interests and partnerships and within the EU. What about the wider sort of strategic vision among German policymakers beyond Europe?
Well, I think there's a recognition that Germany has to look to a global agenda with important partners like the United States. So it's been significant, I think, to see Germany send more than 4,000 soldiers to Afghanistan, something that just a few years ago was unthinkable because it was taboo for Germany to send its troops abroad. Now that's been done, and I think you will see them play a bigger role in the future.
So let's talk about how that changed. I mean, how did it become palatable for Germany to play that role?
Well, I think the generational change, principally, and also in the post-Cold War era, Germany has recognized that it needs to protect areas that are important export markets and sources of energy supplies. So you're seeing Germany looking farther afield to protect its interests, but only in the context of its multinational alliances, such as NATO and the European Union, because I think even the German public is not ready to embark on anything that could be seen as an imperialistic adventure.
Well, one aspect of foreign policy of so many nations we talk about these days is relations with China. What is going on that front?
Well, China has become a very important export market for Germany, but at the same time, Chancellor Merkel has been careful to point out that Germany is not supportive of a lot of the human rights abuses that they see in China. She's met with the Dalai Lama, the spiritual leader of the Tibetan community, in order to show her concern about what China's been doing there. So they're doing a balancing act, like other countries, including the United States, in terms of their relationship with China.
Well, we've got just a few minutes left before we go. I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell us more about the American Council on Germany.
Well, we've been in existence for 60 years, founded by John McCloy, then the High Commissioner for Germany, and several prominent Germans who were active in the anti-Nazi resistance, such as Erich Warburg of the Warburg banking dynasty. And for the first 40 years or so, the ACG played a prominent role in the Cold War security issues. Since the fall of the wall in Berlin, we have looked now more and more at the importance of the business relationship. Germany is a major investor in the United States. A company like Siemens employs more than 60,000 Americans. So it's an important source of jobs and employment in the United States. At the same time, Americans continue to invest a huge sum of money in business in Germany. Last year, 6 times as much money was invested in Germany as in China and India combined. So it shows that despite the rapid rise of places like China and India in terms of the world economy, Germany and the United States still account for the lion's share of trade and investment with each other. So we want to emphasize that, and in that context also sustain the personal ties that have been so important in this partnership. It was easier during the era when we were sending a lot of soldiers over to be based in Germany. I think some 15 million Americans have served done military service stationed in Germany over the course of the last 60 years. Now there are many fewer American soldiers going over there, about only 40,000 as compared to 300,000 in the Cold War. So we need to find other ways in which we can build up the personal network of contacts across the Atlantic. And one way, of course, is through study programs, fellowships, and also conferences among young professional leaders that we have been doing now for many years. And we're very proud of the work and the way in which a lot of Americans have become much more aware of what's going on in Germany and Europe, and thus factored that into their own personal and professional lives.
Well, William Drozdiak, President, American Council on Germany, thank you very much. To our viewers, we'll see you next time on International Focus.
For information about the Institute of World Affairs and its many programs, or to become a member of the Institute, call 414-229-3220 or visit us at our website,